Hey mum, I've made it.
What?
I'm an influencer now.
Who is this?
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine.
In this video, I want to walk through how I got my first brand partnership and how you don't need a big following to do the same. Now, brand partnerships are nothing new in the B2C world, but in typical B2B fashion, brand partnerships are just starting to take off a few years later. And with the likes of LinkedIn starting to amend their ad platform to allow brand sponsors to start amplifying content from creators versus just the brand, that's only going to pour gasoline on the influencer fire. But I'll get onto this a little bit later. Anyway, B2B brand partnerships are very different from B2C. B2C relies on numbers and engagement, while B2B relies on expertise and collaboration. Imagine you're selling a £50,000 a year piece of software to IT managers in 50 to 200 people companies. No amount of Instagram posts are going to be able to push them down the buyer journey. Instead, brands are looking to partner with B2B content creators who can help them inform, educate, and lend credibility through their content, which then in turn, a B2B brand is able to amplify to their target audience market, therefore makes people closer to buying their product. This is especially effective in highly saturated software markets. So how can you get started being a B2B creator? First off, let's look at this diagram that I put together. It took me hours. But if you see at the bottom, we have from none to high distribution. On the left-hand side, we have from low to high value and relevancy. And as you can see on the bottom left-hand corner is where a lot of small creators currently hang out. They don't really have a distribution or an audience of their own, and they don't really have much, highly niche or relevant content that a B2B company would want to go and use, for example. And then what you have on the right-hand side is where most deals are currently being made at the moment, is where someone has a large distribution channel, but because it's so large, their topic isn't that niche, and they don't go too much into depth into something that would make it relevant and great for pushing B2B people through a buying journey. So this top left here is really where the opportunity lies. So the opportunity here would be that you guys don't have a massive audience, but say for example, you're a HR specialist and you use a particular type of software, or you have a particular topic of interest that you talk about all the time. Even though you may not have tens of thousands of people that you're promoting to, you probably have a very engaged audience, and brands actually probably want to tap into your mind, your creative and your thought processes and the way that you use potentially their software, start amplifying your content to their target audience market. Gone are the days where you need massive distribution to be able to actually create a brand partnership deal. For example, I have about 5,000 followers on LinkedIn and I only have around 1,500 subscribers on YouTube, but there's a very sort of cultivated and niche target audience market of B2B buyers. And with the B2B software space especially getting more and more saturated and competitive, these types of creative and insight from brands and the sort of user-generated content is going to become even more important moving forward. So brands are going to start looking to creators, even if they're completely tiny and completely new to the space, as long as they have good creative insights, to start partnering with them. So if you're a B2B creator, how can you actually start working with these companies? And the first step is all around making a list. And a while ago, I started making a list, for example, of companies that I'd love to work with, software that I use on a daily basis. And in this case, it was for Supermetrics. Now, I use Supermetrics all the time to create reports, extract API information, and use them to build internal tools which make my life easier, and I find it super interesting. And I think that's the first one, is people don't normally know what brands they would like to work with. They typically say, I wish brands would reach out to me and sort of offer me money, even though I don't have a massive audience. But the chances are two things are going to happen if brands reach out to you. One is it's not going to be a brand that you want to work with. I mean, I've been reached out to by many fizzy drink brands over the years, but there is no synergy there. But, there's so many creators out there. There's going to be lots of other people that may sit above you from a distribution level, but may not be a creative. So don't leave it to chance that people are going to find you the brands you'd want to work with. So I made that list, and Supermetrics was the example of the one which I wanted to work with potentially, and I think there was really good synergy there from both sides of the coin, which I'll get onto in a minute. Now the next one is around creating content around this product. So for years, maybe not years, but for a long time, I've actually been writing things like LinkedIn posts, which have been tying in how I use Supermetrics within my daily activity, from running an agency to client work to forecasting to creating cool reports. So I've been posting that out there and tagging them. Also actually went through Supermetrics' website and created this whole, I think it was like 10-15 minute video around what I think they do well from digital marketing. So it's a marketing activity for me, but also it was a nice sort of ego boost for them and actually showcasing how they do things really well and showing that I'm actually invested in their brand and keeping an eye on what they're doing and think it's really cool. And this sort of brings on to the final one, which is very much ask for a partnership. This goes back to the first one. If you don't have a list, you don't know who you want to work with, which means therefore you don't know who you should be creating content around, which means number 3, you don't know who you should be asking for partnerships. I think we're getting to the stage now where brands are open for collaboration with these types of creative partnerships. They actually want a differentiator, and you can help them plug that problem. They're spending hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds on ad spend. So they actually want to start supplementing that with better creative, different creative, which they couldn't get elsewhere. So can you help them with that side of things? And if so, they're going to work out. So just message them. Like Supermetrics, for example, I messaged them and said, LinkedIn ads have released thought leadership ads. Would you like to do a partnership here? I can create content around a certain subject matter, which will be relevant to your audience and my audience. You can then amplify it to your audience, which therefore, positions me as a subject matter expert, as well as actually gives you guys new creative and user-generated content around how people can use your product. And for example, you don't even have to, if you haven't got a contact with them to reach out, you can even do things like host them on a one-off podcast, for example. Here's a video of a podcast I did, I think around a year ago, with the head of demand gen from Supermetrics. And this kind of was, again, sort of about building that relationship over the years. I didn't know that I wanted to do creative partnerships. I just knew that if I was going to, they were on my list. So you might as well reach out and start building that relationship, ahead of time before you actually sort of go out there and say, maybe we should partner together. And the final point I want to make is around knowing what you're doing this for. And this is a pretty nuanced point, because I'm not a creator first. I run an agency and I use my content as my promotional tool. So I'm kind of like a creator, but for my own product or service, as it were. Now, because the agency is my business model, I don't need to go about partnerships in the same way that a creator who is just looking to make money directly off partnerships, sponsorships, for example. So in the case of us with Supermetrics, for example, the main and one of the big reasons for us working with them is for 2 reasons. One, which is a smaller reason, would be that, using their software, as a partnership, we then get that for free, which would reduce our OPEX or operational expenditure. The second reason, which is the bigger reason for us, is we have a very shared audience with them. So B2B marketers would be a large section of who they're going after. Now, that's really big for us because at the moment we're spending a lot of money sort of advertising to those personas. And if I'm able to partnership with Supermetrics, one that can happen is I can create content which is going to benefit them and show how actually their software can be useful for these people. But the second one is they're going to amplify my content, which is one, going to obviously save us money in advertising costs, because they're going to be spending money around amplifying content in which I'm featured in, which is obviously great because it's a creative way of getting content out there and actually reducing the ad spend that we're spending each month, but we're still getting that amplification out there. So that's a really good, obviously, draw for us as an agency perspective. The second point to that bit is around we're actually getting more credibility because we're working with this brand who's sort of very large in the space and, well trusted, and it's got a great product. We're being amplified from them, so it's kind of like a quid pro quo that we're kind of creating this user-generated content which we believe in, but we're also getting the credibility behind them of, we're being amplified by that brand, so it's a third-party indicator that, we're a good and trusted company to work with because look at our insights, we're being trusted to work with this partnership. And I feel like that's a really strong positioning for any creator who's running sort of an agency, for example, working with a brand in that sense, because it's kind of mutually beneficial. And we're both getting a lot out of it because we're both amplifying and offering credibility to each other's brands through one, creativity, and the second one is Supermetrics offering it through wider distribution. So that's kind of how it works. But again, you need to work out what it is for you. This isn't what I call traditional creator partnerships, because typically that means you're getting paid directly. Caveat, we're not. We're just getting paid in reduced OPEX. And increased promotion of our product, which for us is very much more worth it than it would be getting paid, X amount of money per month. But a lot of brands, I think you'd find going through this process we've just gone through, would actually pay creators. And we hear about people getting paid from creators and partnerships quite a lot, because otherwise they're just going to pay their design team to create new assets, or they're going to pay their videographers or animators to create new videos. And again, a lot of that stuff is, replicable. If you can go in there, people are spending a lot of money in design on creating very similar assets. But if you can go out there and you can say, I'm going to create user-generated content for how we creatively use your platform, which is actually going to create, it's actually going to mitigate some pain points out there for some of these people looking to solve this. Why wouldn't they amplify this content? And then why wouldn't they pay you as the new ad creative? But rather than ad creative, they're paying you. And you can just then license them or give them a license to be able to actually use your content across social platforms. And I still think this is relatively new to world from a B2B perspective, but if you're a creator looking at actually getting paid and going out there, I think if you go through those 3 steps, create a list of who you'd want to work with and the content and the sort of software or products or services you use all the time. Second one is around actually creating content around it, even if it's just as small as a LinkedIn post. And the third one is then just reach out to them and using that content you've created as a showcase and why you should use it. If it doesn't work, try and get them on the podcast, try and sort of create some relationship outside of just, talking to them directly. Lots of different ways you can do it. And the big opportunity, like I mentioned, and I think it's one of the biggest opportunities in the last sort of 5 years, maybe even longer for B2B, especially in content creators, is the thought leadership ads on LinkedIn, which ultimately allows brands to start amplifying content from creators or individuals who aren't even part of their company as of the 1st of April, 2024. So they don't have to just promote content from their company page. They don't actually have to promote content from just a company page like they used to. Now they can actually promote it from any individual's profile as of 1st of April. Currently, you can do it, but it has to be listed as you're part of their company, so like an employee or a brand ambassador. But moving forward very, very soon, that's not going to be the case. So it's definitely going to be something which is going to get more and more potent. And I think brands can be looking at a way of leveraging and actually getting in contact with people to work with them in tandem on this. And if you want to look at how you can create thought leadership ads and actually, the bigger opportunity that I run down in a bit more detail, I'll link to the video up here. But I hope you found that useful, guys. Any questions, always put them in the comments. Speak to you very soon.